Well, there was another sign today of how difficult reaching that Brexit settlement will be. Immediately after visiting Her Majesty the Queen to request the dissolution of Parliament, Theresa May accused European politicians of seeking to influence next month's general election.
Whoever wins on the 8th of June will face one overriding task: to get the best possible deal for this United Kingdom from Brexit. And in the last few days, we have seen just how tough these talks are likely to be. Britain's negotiating position in Europe has been misrepresented in the continental press. The European Commission's negotiating stance has hardened. Threats against Britain have been issued by European politicians and officials. All of these acts have been deliberately timed to affect the result of the general election that will take place on the 8th of June.
Well, Allie Renison joins us now live from Brussels. She's head of Europe and Trade Policy at the Institute of Directors, which today called for the next government to meet the EU in the spirit of transparent negotiations. So, Allie, it's all getting a bit ugly. I mean, how do both sides turn it down a bit and make it a bit more conciliatory?
I think we have to expect some of this. We're going into a general election, so politics are at an absolute peak fever pitch at the moment. And we'll really be looking for, I think, once the election is over, some more clarity and a little bit more sort of pragmatic talk from both sides. I think we have to remember that both sides sometimes are at fault for letting people be run by tabloid headlines and what who says in what continental or British press. So I think the hope is that once the election is done and dusted, there'll be a lot more clarity and pragmatic talk from both sides.
Well, as you say, Theresa May made these comments today. There are some in Brussels who do not want these talks to succeed, who do not want Britain to prosper. Do you agree, or is she just turning up the rhetoric a bit, do you think?
I mean, it's interesting. I've been in Brussels today with a slew of different businesses from Northern Ireland, talking to a range of different people, British representatives in the European Parliament, European counterparts. And I don't necessarily recognise that, but I think that both sides sometimes talk past each other. You can look at issues like the financial settlement. Actually, if we look at what the European Commission said today, it talked about making sure that there was the principle of the formula reached, not the actual settlement itself. If we look at, for example, there's actually some recognition from both sides about the fact that citizens' rights should be discussed and settled as soon as possible, the Northern Ireland border issue, etc. So I think sometimes both sides are a bit guilty of realising that there's not that much between the two sides.
I've seen one or two suggestions that maybe a third party should get involved here and try and intermediate. I've seen it suggested that the Japanese would be a good candidate. Do you think that's going to gain any traction anywhere?
I think that third parties are certainly already making their representations to both sides. For example, the Japanese government and industry has a clear objective in making sure that there's not a massive disruption to trade. I don't think it would be necessarily the best idea to have one government adjudicate. I think ultimately that, in the spirit of international legal norms, this will be a negotiation between both sides.
Now, it was reported fairly recently that the government had taken a lot of legal advice suggesting that there isn't going to be a bill to pay. There was a House of Lords subcommittee fairly recently chaired by Liberal Democrat Remainer who came to that same conclusion. How is that going to play in Brussels?
Well, as we said, that this, we have to underline that what the EU has agreed is their own respective negotiating mandate. The UK is sometimes not the best at matching that sort of level of transparency. So I think part of the uncertainty from all this stems from the fact that we've had a sort of Brexit white paper, we've had a Great Repeal Bill white paper, but we need a bit more clarity from the UK side about the sort of detailed nature of its objectives so that we understand that where both sides are actually coming from the same positioning point.
How much of this is noise from individual EU countries for their own domestic voters' consumption? I mean, this is going to blow a big hole in the EU budget when Britain leaves. Countries like Germany, the Netherlands, Poland potentially could be financially out of pocket, couldn't they?
It's certainly, the UK is the second biggest net contributor to the European budget, so it certainly is a big potential black pit. Although I don't think that that's necessarily what's driving the EU when it looks at sort of financial settlements, how the calculation should be derived. I do think, though, it's interesting that the House of Lords Committee itself came to the conclusion that there wasn't necessarily an obligation in and of itself for the UK to stump up. And I think this goes to the heart of the fact that we can't really have a complete separation between the withdrawal overall divorce proceedings, if you like, and the new framework, there has to be some overlap at some point soon to sort of, so you can understand that basically there is a lot of trade-offs and coordination between the two phases of negotiation.